One of the clear casualties of the COVID-19 pandemic is student learning. Our next guest has been focusing attention on the issue. Dr. Bob Libke is Senior Fellow at the Center for Effective Education at the John Locke Foundation. His recent research brief is titled Reversing Learning Loss, What We Know. Bob, first of all, there's been some question among some people who are active in North Carolina policy about whether there is even such a thing as learning loss. Learning loss actually is real.
Yeah, it exists. I don't think serious people entertain, the reality of the other side of that issue, that there is no learning loss. I think it is real. I think it is substantial, and it will be documented when we go back to testing and so forth. I don't think serious people think that if we have kids out of the classroom for the length of time that they have been, that they're not going to suffer, learning loss and not be where most of us hope they would be academically.
Your research brief offers 4 recommendations for addressing the learning loss. Let's go through them. The first one is recognize the nature and scope of the problem. You point out some data that shows that there is serious learning loss, especially from some of the groups that are most disadvantaged.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest issues here is that we need to really conceive of this problem the proper way, and that is that kids come to this issue, that they're in school or in remote learning opportunities, and everybody's been impacted differently. I mean, there are kids in urban areas that are, in the classroom maybe 1 or 2 times a week. They have good virtual learning opportunities. They come from good backgrounds. They may be impacted less than kids in rural areas. They may come from more disadvantaged backgrounds economically and don't have the same options, to virtual learning that other schools do. So, we can see this. We know that the pandemic has impacted kids differently from different economic backgrounds, from different racial backgrounds, and it's something we really need to look at. And when we decide on a solution, we have to make sure that it really considers those differences.
Your second recommendation is employ the right solution. And after that, you have a colon, and the right solution that you're applying there is tutoring.
Yes, I think we see, if you're looking at the research on a lot of ways to address learning loss, what's emerging within the research is that tutoring is the best way to do this. And why that is because of what I just previously said. Kids are all over the map academically, and I don't think it would do well for the students to put a teacher up in the front of a classroom and expect them to reach kids where they're all over the map academically. I think a better solution would be to employ a tutor, put them in groups of 3 or 4, and really provide some sort of tailored instruction to see where they are at and what needs to be done to improve their levels of performance academically. That's a far better solution. And there are some examples of research, a number of states that have done that successfully.
A third thing that you recommend is ensuring the proper safeguards, and I think part of that is that this will be the second summer that we've had to deal with this, and the last summer there was a lot of money put forward to help with students, and it doesn't seem that it was used exactly the way that we hoped it would be.
That's right. That's referring to basically the state auditor's report, where they reviewed a number of programs that were funded last year to address essentially learning loss, kids that were impacted adversely by the pandemic. And we found out that DPI did not have safeguards in place to track the money to even find out if the money did what it was supposed to do, and that was improve academic performance. So that really has to be addressed to make sure that money that is being spent, is being spent properly.
Recommendation number 4, give parents options. That seems to fit along with everything else we've been talking about, that you can't just have one program for every kid in the state and say this is going to be the one that works.
Yeah, that's really what's come out of this pandemic is parents have seen a couple of things. One, they've seen that the school systems haven't been able to pivot, effectively to deliver other educational options. And they also see that just within the last year that the interests of teachers and administrators don't often line up with the interests of students. So they want choices. They want choices, to be able to put their child in the best educational opportunity for them. And oftentimes what we think now, based on the polling that we did in January, we think the best vehicle to deliver tutoring and to really remedy learning loss here is an education savings account.
And for those who aren't familiar, just remind us briefly what an education savings account is and how it would help these families.
Sure. An education savings account, or an ESA, for short, is a account that the state funds, but basically gives control over to a parent, and they can use that funds in that account to, in this particular case, use towards meeting educational expenses. In this case, we'd allow the monies to be spent for tutoring, testing, or books, anything related to enhancing the child's academic development. There's about 5 states now that have ESAs, North Carolina being one of them, but they're very popular vehicles, and we think they're the wave of the future for school choice.
Well, once again, the research brief is titled Reversing Learning Loss, What We Know. Its author is Dr. Bob Libke. He is Senior Fellow at the Center for Effective Education at the John Locke Foundation. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Mitch.